Questions of Doom.
Hello, welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, I attempt to answer questions which you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address as displayed on the channel homepage, or alternatively as displayed at the end of this video. In answering any questions that you send me via video, I hope that the answers will be useful to more than just the asker, and therefore hopefully more people out there in YouTube land will benefit from these answers and questions. So today I have received a question from someone calling themselves Cisco, or it could be Kisco, but I'm assuming it's Cisco. And it goes something like this. Hello, Archaeosoup. I'm currently studying about archaeological theories, and I think about them lately as I read further. So my questions are kind of serious compared to others that you've answered before. Controversial. One, on reading the history of archaeological thought, especially between processualism and post-processualism, brackets, or postmodernist to some, theories, I've been thinking, these don't sound like theories, brackets, in science, that we are most accustomed to, but instead they look like two possible methods on excavating sites. And to think that many archaeologists fight like crazy over these theories. What's your opinion on these opposing camps? And which archaeological theory do you like the most? Thanks, Cisco. Well, Cisco, despite your disparaging of the previous questions, I think this is an excellent question. Actually, it's very well worth taking some time to think about and actually to answer this one. You're right. There has been a long tradition, especially over the past 20 odd years, of archaeologists picking a camp and then fighting tooth and nail to defend it. Processualism and post-processualism are not, you're quite right, they're not theories in the same way that, say, the theory of gravity is an idea which is relatively concrete and and can be accepted as a way of doing something else, or can be inserted into other equations and to inform other people's work. These are not succinct ideas. They are, you're quite right, approaches, and in this way they're probably best described as philosophies. The actual the approach of processualism and post-processualism is more than just a way of excavating a site. It's a way of understanding a site and a way of understanding the implications of archaeology from those sites and the different, I suppose to a certain extent, the different ways that people are trying to eke as much information as they can out of archaeology as it's excavated. Now, for me, the idea that they are opposing camps is a bit of a slightly misleading one and a slightly unhelpful notion, really. They are different ways of trying to get the best that can be gotten, as it were, out of archaeology. And to a certain extent, actually, they are a continuation of thought. They're not two opposing camps. You don't have to be A or B, or processualist or a post-processualist. You can attempt to merge them, and actually sometimes the best solutions come when that happens. Now, I'll take an example. Probably the best example from the past, probably the past 40 years, has been the pursuit of an explanation of cultural change. Why do things happen? Why do things change in culture? Why, for example, is irrigation invented? And traditionally, a processualist may say, well, it's because of outside factors. It's other processes within this cultural model which have led to change. So maybe the environment becomes more arid, and therefore the culture is made to change and create irrigation. However, there is a problem there, and that is that this is an explanation of change with reference to processes, which can only really be explained with reference to more processes. So it's one continually affecting series of discrete wheels almost, which you never really get down to a cause. All you ever do is just keep on saying, well, this happened because that happened, and that happened because that happened, and then that happened, so that happened there. and you never really get down to a truth, as it were. You sort of end up going around in circles. So a post-processual notion would be to try and invoke the individual, to try and think about the context of, say, Joe Bloggs, who may or may not have come up with irrigation. This particular site here seems to be a very early irrigation area. Why did this happen? And in invoking the individual, you start to think about human nature. You start to think about the fact that, well, you don't really wake up in the morning and think, what's best for my culture? I think I'll go and invent irrigation. Instead, what you actually do is you see that your neighbour has a river running past their property, and you want some water too. So you make a change. You invoke a change through your personal motivations. The problem there is, though, that they're very hard to tie down, and in the same way that with processes, you end up going around in circles. With this notion of individual action and the ultimate contextuality of action being important, it's very hard to actually to locate it. How do you locate someone making a decision to create irrigation? How do you prove it to a certain extent? And this problem of cultural change has continued, and it did continue for quite a while up until very recently. A few years ago, with the retirement of Colin Renfrew from his Disney professorship at Cambridge, there was a book produced in honour of his work, actually. And if you know anything about the career of Colin Renfrew, in the 60s and 70s, he was very much trying to tackle this notion of cultural change. And what they did, specifically under I think the leadership of Chris Scarr, when they did some editing essentially on this group of texts, and what they did was they brought together people who were processualist, people who were post-processualist, and people who, frankly, didn't really have a massive leaning, as it were, and they attempted to look at cultural change once more, and that's probably been the most useful book on this topic, and it's most useful because it takes the best from everyone's approaches. And so that's probably that would be my answer. My answer is that archaeology is a discipline as a whole, and to try and break it down into theories of archaeology is actually a bit of a retrograde step. You're probably best thinking about these things as philosophies, and you're probably best actually seeing them as a continuing development of thought, a continuum, as it were, of notions which can be mutually affecting, can be sometimes at odds, but more often than not, when taken together, can actually reveal more than either camp can on its own. So I will put the link, actually, or a link to that particular text in the information bar below. So feel free to pop over and have a look at it. It's one of the McDonald Institute sort of folios, as it were. So definitely worth a look. And if you are looking at these issues at the moment, or anyone else actually is, and if someone asks you, because especially this is a favourite topic actually for essays in uni, is which camp is better? The answer is almost always going to be they both have merit and they're both working to an eventual goal. And if you think about it, actually, one can only have existed because the other one existed before it, and they merged and developed and grew. And actually, if you look at some of the earliest post-processual texts, they're not setting up a new camp. They're simply criticising what's being done before, but in a constructive way. It's a criticism which is trying to refine technique and philosophy down to something which is ultimately more useful. But archaeology is one of those things where we will never have the theory of archaeology laid out, because we're dealing with human nature, and human nature is often complicated, always remarkable, and almost certainly not quantifiable. So hopefully, this has been a bit of a rambling one, really, but hopefully this has been useful or interesting to you, and to anyone else who has been watching. Processualism, post-processualism, the age-old argument. So, thank you for your questions, Cisco. I very much enjoyed thinking about this, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to discuss it out loud. If anyone else has any questions or any comments, feel free to make comments below, or alternatively send questions my way and I shall answer them as and when I can. There are a couple of questions actually in the inbox, those of you who know if you've sent me one, which I'm taking some time actually to come up with a decent answer to, mainly because they're such good questions that a 5-minute thought process about them wouldn't really do them justice. So if you sent me one and it seems as though I haven't quite got around to it, that's the reason why. I'm taking some time to consider them. So yes, until next time, thank you very much.